because they cared more about solving the climate crisis together than they did about sleep. And that's the world I also want to talk about today. Uh, and before we begin, I need to confess something. What I'm about to share with you made me question everything I thought I knew about teaching. And fair warning, by the end of this 50 minutes, it might do the same to you. For 20 years, I stood at the front of my classroom and taught students about the world. I had maps on my walls, textbooks with colorful photos, and I genuinely believed I was doing good work. I thought my job was to prepare students to navigate a divided world. And I was wrong. My job, our job, isn't to prepare students to navigate division. It's to empower them to build bridges, to mend the division, to heal the division. So this presentation is called Building Cultural Bridges, Reimagining Education Through Global Project-Based Learning. But it's really about the morning I realized I had done it wrong, and the night that I made the decision to do better. And more importantly, how my students taught me to do it right. So let me tell you about 7:42 a.m. See here, can we get? All right, so 7:42 a.m. in Garden Grove, California. First period world history. I have about 30 10th graders settling in, doing that thing that teenagers do when they're technically in their seats, but they're still in bed. And I was about to start my lesson and my phone buzzed. I don't usually check my phone during class, but this notification made my heart skip. It was from Professora Maria, my teaching partner in Sao Paulo, Brazil. It was 7:42 a.m. in California, which meant it was 11:42 p.m. in Brazil. Maria should have been asleep. Her students should have been home with their families. But when I looked at the notification, I saw something that made me freeze mid-sentence. Our shared Google Doc, the one where my students and Maria's students had been collaborating on a climate justice project, was alive. A green cursor from Valentina in Brazil, typing in real time. Red text from my student Marcus, editing Valentina's paragraph about Amazon deforestation issues. Blue comments from Lydia, asking questions in kind of a modified Spanish. Purple highlights from Carlos in Sao Paulo, correcting Marcus's translation. 6,000 miles apart, 3 time zones, multiple languages, one document. And it was our shared mission to save our planet. Now, Jaden is a kid who usually slept through first period with his hood up, and he was staring at me. And he said, "Hey, Mr. Silva, why do you look like you just saw a ghost?" And I told him the truth, because I'm seeing the opposite of a ghost. I'm seeing education come alive. I turned my laptop toward the class and I pulled up the document. I said, "Do you see this right here? Right now, while you're complaining about being tired, your project partners in Brazil are staying up past midnight to work with you." And the room went completely silent. And then I read to them what Valentina had just written. She wrote, "Marcus, your idea about solar panels is brilliant, but have you considered what happens when families can't afford them?" And this is the best part for me about the story is my students are predominantly low-income students. And those of you who have done project-based learning before, I think that there's a difference in the benefits as we walk through the benefits. When students with very limited resources are working with students with very limited resources, they're different in their innovation. There's a different need and urgency, which makes this such a great experience for me. Marcus is a kid who told me the week before, "Nobody cares about my opinions." But he pulled out his phone and he started typing on the Google Doc. And he wrote in broken Spanish, Valentina, what if we got businesses to sponsor solar panels for one family? And then that one family teaches their neighbors how they work. That is innovation from a under-resourced community speaking to another under-resourced community. That's why it was such a great comment. Then Valentina's response appeared, perfecto. My cousin works for an environmental group here in Brazil. I can ask her. Next, something magical happened with Lydia, who was the one who also speaks some Spanish. She raised her hand and asked if she could call her grandmother in Mexico because her grandmother knew about solar panels. Jaden reveals now that his mom works for the electric company and talked about solar incentives and wanted to find out how they happen in other countries. So in 5 minutes, my class transformed into this multinational problem-solving group. And then they start arguing. Well, not arguing, they start engaging in a passionate debate about the best way to make renewable energy accessible to low-income families. And here's the thing nobody reminds us anymore about teaching. Teaching is fun. Being around kids is fun. Their energy, their humor, the way they see the world is a gift. And watching Marcus realize that Valentina cares about the same things he cares about, even though she's in a different hemisphere, speaks in different languages, and faces some different challenges. Watching them discover their differences are part of being a strong collaborator instead of obstacles, man, that was awesome. That moment when a kid stops seeing a quote unquote student in Brazil and starts seeing my partner, my collaborator, my teammate in Brazil. And that's what education should be. So it hits me. These weren't just my students anymore. They were global citizens. They weren't just learning about the world, they were actively attempting to change it. And for the first time in 20 years of teaching, education wasn't happening to my students, it was happening with my students. But here's the thing. My transformation didn't happen overnight. And it didn't start at 7:42 a.m. in Garden Grove. It started with a moment I'm not proud of, a moment where I realized I'd been failing students for 2 decades without even knowing it. It started with a student named Lynn and a paper that she wrote that broke my heart because it showed me that no matter where a child lives, they deserve to have their voice matter. And I'd been teaching in a way that told Lynn that her voice didn't. All right, here we go. This section is called My Grandmother Doesn't Call It the Vietnam War. Oh, sorry. 2 years before that morning, I was teaching the Vietnam War unit. Half my students were children of Vietnamese refugees. This is Garden Grove, California. And I'm standing there holding a U.S. history textbook that told their families stories like footnotes in America's narrative. And Lucy played the beginning of the TED Talk where I talk about this. What that talk doesn't cover is the fact that I had assigned a research paper. It was very straightforward, right? Analyze the causes of the Vietnam War using, and here's a term I really want to emphasize today, using reliable sources. Lynn turned in 5 pages, standard stuff, military strategies, casualty statistics, American foreign policy objectives, everything I'd asked for, properly cited from the textbook and academic databases. But at the bottom, almost hidden, like she was ashamed of it, she added one single paragraph. It said, my grandmother doesn't call it the Vietnam War. She calls it the war against America. She said the textbook makes it sound like America was helping, but she remembers the bombs. She said I should write about that, but I don't think that's what you want for this assignment. Lynn had been in my classroom for 2 years, carrying her grandmother's lived experience of the war we were studying, but she didn't believe it counted as a reliable source. Her family's truth was like a hidden footnote in her education. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at that paper, and I asked myself a question that would change everything. What if students didn't have to choose between their heritage and their education? What if they could use both to learn about the world? The doubt wasn't just about my teaching methods, it was deeper. How many other Lins are sitting in classrooms across America, editing themselves out of their own learning? How many brilliant perspectives were we losing because we taught students to value textbook voices over their own family histories? And here's the uncomfortable truth. I had been doing this for 20 years. 20 years of teaching students to cite reliable sources while ignoring the most reliable sources sitting right in front of me, their own family's experiences. So that night, I did something that terrified me. I threw out the pacing guide. All right, so in throwing out that pacing guide, I started to try to connect my students to the content and recognized the 4 benefits of global project-based learning. We're going to walk through each of these. This was the intent. I know we're a little squished on time, but for each of these, I had a short story prepared, but I want to make sure we get to the benefits, how they relate to you, and then to the Q&A. But as I see it, and in my experience over the last few years, the benefits have been cross-cultural competence, real-world application, digital skills development, and increased engagement in the classroom. So let's look at the first one here. These are often overlooked benefits, and if I'm going to be honest, when I say overlooked, I mean that schools actively avoid them because they're messy. They're hard to measure, and they require us to admit that maybe we don't have all the answers. The first benefit is what researchers call cross-cultural competence. But let me show you what that actually looks like, because it's not some abstract soft skill. Standing in front of Lynn's class, the same class where she had hidden her grandmother's truth, I took a deep breath and said something I've never said before. I don't have the curriculum right for this topic yet, but I want to learn how to do it better. Will you help me? My students were trained to consume information, not create it. They were trained to be taught, not take the role of the teacher for their teacher. So I continued and I considered partnering with the class in Vietnam and having the different perspectives be told back and forth on Zoom calls. Lynn was floored to find out that her grandmother's story would be an integral part of this assignment. And this kind of project changed everything. When we presented our final projects, our partner school in Vietnam and our school, about our parents or the kids' parents and grandparents' different perspectives on the war, both classrooms were crying. Not because the stories were sad, although some were. They were crying because they finally understood that history isn't just a collection of facts. It's like a tapestry of human experiences, and every thread matters. Now, the research backs this up. Mansilla and Jackson work on global competence shows it's critical for 21st century education. But here's what that research paper doesn't quite capture. Students developing what some people call empathetic expertise. Not just empathy, but empathetic expertise, the ability to understand complex global issues through the lens of human relationships, not through abstract policy. So in the TED Talk, you're going to see me say, we don't need another generation trained merely to compete. We need a generation trained to collaborate and connect. And this is what I meant. Global project-based learning creates listeners, not the polite waiting for your turn to talk kind, but the real kind. The kind who hears someone 6,000 miles away and think, your grandmother's story changes how I understand my own history. And why do schools overlook this? Well, we're busy teaching students to compete on standardized tests, to teach them how to collaborate across cultures. We measure what's easy to grade, not what matters for their future. And yes, part of connecting is empathy, but empathy doesn't show up on state assessments. But here's the beautiful part. When students develop cross-cultural competence, they don't just become better global citizens, they become better human beings. Our next benefit is real-world application of skills. Remember Marcus from my opening story, the solar panel genius whose partner called his idea brilliant? Let me tell you what happened before that moment. Marcus was the kid who sat in the back of the room with this hoodie on. I had to bug him to take his headphones out. And motivational pep talks didn't work, and parent conferences didn't work. But being seen for having a good idea by someone from another country, Marcus looked at me that day with his eyes wide open. He felt recognized. And he felt like there are people, maybe not what he saw as his classmates or people in his neighborhood, but there are people in this world who care about the same things he cares about. That's a bridge right there. Not the technology, not the project structure. That moment of we're not that different is a bridge. I said to him, Marcus, your ideas matter. They always did. You just needed someone from 6,000 miles away to show you what I'd been having trouble showing you. So I wrote a chapter for a book called Crossing Digital Borders, and it's got part of this story in it. But the big idea is this: when learning is personal, it's transformational. And there's research there too. Strobel and Van Barneveld found that project-based learning improves problem solving and content mastery compared to traditional instruction. But some of those textbooks don't tell you this. Students retain content when they care about the outcome. Marcus didn't just learn about climate change and renewable energy. He applied math to calculate solar panel efficiency. He used science to understand the photovoltaic cells. He practiced language skills to communicate across linguistic barriers, and he studied social studies to understand economic barriers to clean energy. On a project that mattered to him with a partner that became someone that mattered to him also. Why do schools miss this? Because we're under pressure to cover the curriculum, which is code for mention everything once, but ensure that no one remembers it too deeply. Next benefit is digital collaboration skills. And more research, I think this year alone, 2025 had plenty of papers saying this is what future ready students are going to need in this growingly interconnected world. And so this is a tricky topic here because I don't want this to turn into an educational technology presentation. It can be as simple as a Google Doc. Now, I want to be very clear. I am an advocate for using Adobe Express and Wakelet to do these projects. Both are very inexpensive. And I just want to say before time runs out, if you want help using Adobe Express and Wakelet to do a cultural exchange and then figure out how to use that later for something like global project-based learning, I would be happy to help with that. But this one is a little bit more obvious, so I want to move on from this one because the concern might be my district doesn't have some of this stuff. And I can appreciate that. I worked with a school in the Philippines, an elementary school. They had one laptop with one camera. So you might have to adjust your timeline to maybe a little longer because maybe your partner school doesn't have one-to-one computers, and it might take them time to film their videos and upload their videos. Also, we want to lower our expectations for the quality of things that are being produced, because remember, the connection is more important than the technology and the video editing. Although I have found with high school students in many countries, their ability to edit videos on their phone is pretty darn spectacular. Give them a chance, and then again, have them teach you how they're editing. All right, the most important benefit here before we get to the Q&A and some final thoughts here is the increased engagement and motivation. Plenty of studies over time, including very recently, on project-based learning by itself. The studies aren't all global project-based learning, although I cite Dr. Carolyn Ferguson in my TED Talk. But project-based learning is increased engagement and motivation. Right? Remember Jaden, my hoodie kid. He started showing up to school early. He started saying things like, "I don't want to turn my partners down." Later, we did a collaboration with India about water, and he was a lead person on that project. I got an email from Jaden's mom. She said, "I don't know what you're doing in that class, but Jaden talks about it at dinner every night. He's teaching his little brother about the water cycle. He asked me to donate to a clean water organization for his birthday instead of getting presents. What happened to my son?" And I just wrote back, he found his voice, and someone 8,000 miles away was listening. And you know why that matters? It's not about one kid getting engaged. It's about what it says about human nature. We spend so much time in education trying to motivate students with grades, college applications, future careers, and those things matter. But what really motivated Jaden on this project was that Priya in Mumbai was counting on him, knowing that if he didn't show up, he'd let down someone who trusted him. Turns out kids don't just want to succeed for themselves. They want to matter to someone else. They want to know their actions have meaning beyond their neighborhood or their school campus or their zip code. That's not a curriculum standard. That's human nature. And when we tap into that, we connect kids across borders. We're not just teaching content. We're showing them they belong to something bigger than themselves. Now, the research does say that project-based learning increases intrinsic motivation. Right? Early 90s Blumenfeld's work shows that higher participation rates, better attendance, more family involvement. But what the research doesn't capture also is that students discover their voices matter on a global stage now. If their ideas could cross oceans and create change, they experience deeper satisfaction. And they're also learning across cultural and linguistic barriers. It's hard to hate somebody from a country that you've partnered with. I'm going to go ahead and skip right now elaborating on this to get a little bit back on time for everybody, so to honor the rest of our speakers here. Big ideas, students don't just study the world, they help reshape it. They like stories about heroes, but here in any of the other countries that celebrate Halloween, how many kids dress up as a hero? They do that because they want to be heroes also. And if you give them the opportunity, they will take it. They may not show it right away, but they will take it. the TED Talk ends on a on the note that our kids are ready. Every child deserves a moment where they realize their voice matters, and this moment changes everything. So, what can we do to help them, give them what they need? I think we need to connect their home stories with the content as best we can, and that means knowing the kids in front of us and being able to respond to that. They're they're waiting for us to show them that their ideas matter and that people are listening. That's what education is supposed to do. That's a child discovering that they can change the world. That's a classroom becoming a launch pad, not for individual success for that one kid, but for collective transformation of a community. And here's what I want you to know, what I need you to know. Our kids are ready to collaborate. They're ready to solve problems. They're ready to build bridges where other societies have built walls. They're ready to choose connection over division, understanding over judgment, and collaboration over competition. The question is, are we ready to let them do these things? Are we ready to trust students with real collaboration, to value family knowledge alongside textbook knowledge? Are we ready to reimagine education as bridge building instead of gatekeeping? And are we ready to admit that maybe, just maybe our students can teach us how to heal a divided world? I think we are. I think that's why you're in this room. I think you already know that education is more than test scores and college life. I think you became a teacher because you believed somewhere deep down that your classroom could be a launch pad for something bigger. And I'm here to tell you that it can be. Not someday, not when you have more resources, not when the system changes, right now, with the students in front of you, with the tools you already have. So let's talk about how. All right, some of the barriers to getting this done. Let's get to the real stuff here. Okay, so some of you are thinking that sounds great, but we don't have all kinds of things. And I hear you, I see you, and I want you to know that I've been there also. I've been the teacher spending my own money on supplies, and had an administrator say, hey, that sounds great, but we need to focus on test preparation. I felt like the system was working against some of my innovations. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you there's no barriers. There are real ones, painful ones. But I'm also not going to let those barriers steal the possibility of what could happen for your students. Because I believe every child deserves to experience connection across cultures, no matter their zip code, no matter their school's resources, no matter their circumstances. That's not naive optimism. That's a commitment. So let me address some of these barriers. Okay. Number one is technology access. Here's something you can do. Okay. Start with one shared class device for just video calls. If they have to write out or type out that some of their correspondence and you take an image of that or a picture of it and you post that, then post a picture of something written if they don't all have access to something. But have one device where you're doing that and it tracks and gets organized. Partner with a library, a community center that has community access. Apply for grants. Have the students take turns. Have them use their phone if they can't. Okay. Next is a teacher's preparation for doing something like this, because most teacher preparation programs don't teach international collaboration. Mine didn't. But there's great organizations, especially like the sponsors of this and Actionable Innovations and Lucy and the Digital Citizenship Institute. Okay. There are groups of people who want to help with this. This conference is full of people who are willing to help. Let's reach out. Let's use some of the resources that you'll get as part of this. The last part is the willingness of the adult in the room to not be the expert. Okay. You're going to have to give up some control. And then So solutions would be start small, ask one shared question, get the hang of it, meet some people, and reach out to a lot of the resources that are being provided here over the last couple of days. Uh, Here's a little quick checklist that I highly recommend, and then we'll get to start the Q&A, and then as time runs out, we'll just have the time run out. Identify a partner or network group that likes to connect people. Set goals for the project. I would say set small goals. Align it with your curriculum, so when you talk to your administrator about it, you're saying, hey, this lines up A, B, and C. Choose what tools you want to collaborate with. I recommend Adobe Express and Wakelet, okay? But it could just be a Google Doc. It could be Book Creator. And if you're not sure, just message me through Instagram and I will help you, okay? Um, I'd be happy to help you. All right. Quick Q&A here. We anticipated the questions, so unfortunately, it won't be as generic or authentic as what was here, but it's often the same questions, folks. Who are we kidding, right? One, what if I don't speak another language as a teacher? Neither do I, okay? My high school Spanish got me through basic conversations. Google Translate or other online translation tools are good enough. More importantly, it teaches students that you don't need to be fluent to connect. You need to be willing to try. And you need to be willing to make mistakes and to learn together. It's actually a very powerful model for them to see. If I connected repeatedly with Vietnam and the Philippines and Brazil. Okay. I don't speak any of those languages. Okay. But we did our best and it meant a lot. And you learn over time. And then you get help from the other group. Maybe they help with the translations. Everything ends up being presented, though, bilingually. How do I find time to plan an international project on top of everything else? Well, you're not adding to your curriculum, you're transforming how you deliver what you already teach. Climate justice can hit earth science and government. Okay. I didn't teach more content, I made the content matter more. Start with 1 unit per year and making that your unit. If you start at the beginning of the year, make it a second semester unit. Plan it over time, execute it, and then once you've gotten through that process and you have a workflow, you can apply that to an earlier unit, or over summer, you can do a first semester unit. What if students don't have internet at home? Make it work during class time. Use asynchronous collaboration where students contribute during the day when they have access. Partner with your library. The project will move slower, but first time through, that's okay. Slow and meaningful beats fast and forgotten every time. How do I convince my administration? Lead with standards alignment. Show them exactly which state standards each project addresses. Bring data. I can share engagement metrics, attendance improvements, test score data, but honestly, sometimes you have to pilot it small and show success with your class and give data about your kids showing engagement and attendance and all of that. And let those results speak. Administrators respond to evidence and alignment. What if it fails? What if the students don't engage? This is the what if they're just not into you question. Well, then you learn and you iterate. My first international project was a disaster. The time zone difference was chaos. Final product was mediocre. But I learned what worked. Second project was better. The third project was transformational. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be willing to try. And honestly, students are more forgiving of authentic attempts than we give them credit for. So I want to wrap up here by saying thank you. I encourage you to watch the TEDx talk or finish watching it. I do have a book out, or I contributed to an anthology with some of the other TEDx speakers. My chapter is called Crossing Digital Borders and has some more stories that aren't in the TED Talk. I have a podcast called Teach for Can you guys hear me? I think I got kicked out for a second. How's it going?
Yes, you're still here.
Okay, sorry, I got kicked out, so my computer went crazy. So
You're still live. Is there anything else you want to share with us,
no,
Alfredo, before we wrap
no, I
up?
just want to thank you for the opportunity to connect with the people here and to putting this conference together. It has been a incredible year to be able to talk about these things, and I just want to say thank you for everything you're doing to put this together.
Thanks. We had a couple of comments. Let me see if I can put them up on the stage. Let's see if they're showing up here. I don't know where they went. That's very strange. There's one that I'll read them to you because I'm in the other end of this as well. Dawn mentioned, she said, I agree with you. I really focused on giving students voice, power with versus power over, power with versus power over, and listening to students. And then she suggests that you might be interested in a book called Bridging Cultures, Multiculturalism, Social Integration, Intergroup Relations and Education in the Canadian Context.
Thank you for that. I'm presenting later with the Canadian Jane
Okay.
G from Green Bay Studios.
It looks like she's the author of the book. Her name's Dawn Courage Popatia. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. It was written in the 90s, and it talks about immigrant and refugee youth. And then, and in the book, she says they discussed topics of the study and their own school experiences and perspectives in their own languages. So her name's Dawn Courage and Popatia. And she's you can find her in the directory of attendees if you want.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you everyone for being here. Sorry about the snafus, but I think you got a good taste of Alfredo's wonderful work with students and the practicalities of being a classroom teacher and how you can infuse a global perspective into what you do. The recording will be up shortly. And Alfredo, we really appreciate your time. And there's a whole set of other sessions starting at the top of the hour. So jump into session rooms or onto featured presentation stage 1 for our next set. Okay. Thanks, Alfredo. Have a good day.
Everyone.
I appreciate your time. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Okay, we're good.